Okay, so in this session, we will be discussing research findings from our country forums we conducted in 10 different countries in Asia. We conducted these forums as part of our research project to gain a more in-depth understanding of cultural specific issues and opportunities, and to create a more comprehensive report that we can share with the local advocates and organizations. To conduct these forums, we developed standardized questions and steps to follow for our country coordinators. However, because of our varying degrees of coordinators' capacity, as well as the current situations of animal advocacy movement in each country, we had to make some adjustments to fit the different needs of the coordinators, as well as the local advocates that we spoke to. To put it short, I want to make a disclaimer here that the findings from these forums come from different forms of data collection. Some are more like forums, like focus groups, and others are more individual interviews. Despite these differences, our country coordinators connected with local advocates and facilitated these amazing group discussions and interviews. So I'm really excited that we can share some of our findings with you today. I also want to say a special thank you to the participants, the local advocates who participated in the forums, as well as AIM, one of our team, who analyzed and organized the findings by theme, and MIMP, who created infographics for the report, which I will show you later. Okay, so before moving on to the forum findings, I want to introduce ourselves. So country coordinators, let's go around and tell everyone your name and the country you are representing for this forum.
Hi, so my name is Elia Khan, and I'll be talking about the forum findings in Pakistan today. Thank you. Shubhra.
Hello, everyone. My name is Shubhra Shukla. I'm going to talk about India's forum and findings of Indian forum. Over to you, Srajan.
Thank you, Shubhra. Hello, everyone, and namaste. My name is Surajan Shrestha, and I'm based in Nepal. And I'm currently a country representative of Animal Alliance Asia for Nepal. Thank you. Sarah?
Surajan. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'll be presenting the findings for the forum that I held in Malaysia. Do or AIM.
Sorry, I have a technical problem. Hello, my name is Do. I'm Thailand collab, and yeah, I co-work with AIM. Please.
Hi everyone, nice to see you here. My name is AIM. I am Thailand country co-rep and I work with Do. And today I will be presenting the findings that we got from the forum in Thailand. Next, Fajar.
Hello, selamat malam to everyone joining from Indonesia tonight. My name is Fajar. I'm the country rep for Indonesia, and tonight I will be talking about the findings from the Indonesia forum. Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Han. I'll be sharing the findings for Vietnam. Joseph?
Hi everyone, Joseph from the Philippines, presenting the findings from the different forums we had in the Philippines. Okay.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. I'm Pim from Taiwan, and I'm going to talk about the finding in Taiwan. Thank you. Kaho or Em?
Yeah, I think that's it. We were supposed to have Ellie representing for Japan. Unfortunately, there was some accident happened to her, so she won't be joining us today. But yeah, without further ado, let's start sharing the screen. Give me one moment. Can everyone see my screen? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, I can't really. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so before moving on to the cross-cultural discussions, I'd like to give you a brief summary of the findings. Here are the lovely photos from some of our forums. And as you can see, some were conducted, some forums were done online and others were in person. These animal advocacy forums were conducted for current and aspiring leaders in the animal justice movement in Asia to discuss their country's specific challenges and to develop solutions and strategy in their own languages. We conducted our forums in India, Indonesia, Japan, Malaysia, Nepal, Pakistan, Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, and Vietnam. So just to give you a very brief summary of the findings, we found out that there are 10 to 20 active animal advocacy organizations in each country. The number varies depending on the country, and there may be more smaller grassroots groups, but overall there are many established organizations at the moment. And most of the existing organizations are small in size with 10 to 20 active staff members. And these local organizations mostly work for companion animals, stray animals, working animals, animals used for experimentation and entertainment, and very few work for farmed animals, although there are still a few in some countries. The advocates who are working for non-human animals in Asia come from different backgrounds and professions, so there's a lot of diversity in terms of skills and knowledge. The common approaches used in Asia are street outreach, school outreach, corporate engagement, animal rescue and wildlife conservation, awareness raising education, such as seminars and educational courses. However, some of these approaches, for instance, street outreach, are almost non-existent in some countries, such as in Pakistan, Thailand, and Vietnam. We also found that there are very few organizations working on legal and policy changes, so we could see the gap there. Through the forums, we also wanted to identify where the movement is at in each country. Based on Bill Moyer's Movement Action Plan, which maps out the progress of successful social movements, according to this map, there are 8 stages for movement to achieve its goal. And with this map, advocates are able to better plan long-term strategy by understanding what needs to happen at a particular stage of their movement. And although not all successful social movements follow this exact same pattern, it provides good insight to what the movement has to do at the particular stage of the movement and what they need to prepare for the next stage. So even though this might not be the accurate representations of the stage of all animal justice movements, we thought that it's still useful to identify where the animal justice movement is at in each country. So based on our findings, we found that Indonesia, Japan, Nepal, Pakistan, Thailand, and Vietnam are in the very early stage of the movement. So this is where people are not really caring about the issues and the movements. So the movements are really small, but there are people who are working on the ground and trying to get more attention from the general public. But the general public is not really responding fast enough. And we have India, Malaysia, and the Philippines in the stage 2. In these countries, they have succeeded in getting more people to acknowledge the issues and exposing some institutions' failure to address the issues. Compared to stage 1, issues are more widely known and more people are interested in doing something to change the situation. And we have Taiwan, which is in stage 3, where a lot of people are really interested in the movement and there are new groups forming to address the issues. Unfortunately, we couldn't see any large-scale movements that we can really identify as being in stage 4 through A, but we hope to see more advancement of the movement in each country in the next few years. So while there are a lot of different initiatives happening in the region, there are certain approaches that are lacking in the region as well. For the overall movement, local advocates indicated the need for more policy and research institutes to really understand and better strategize their advocacy work. Advocates also expressed the need for more collaborations within the movement as well as outside the movement. So for instance, there needs to be more pro-intersectional projects addressing other social justice issues. And local advocates also wish to see more youth activism, so younger people leading initiatives, and also more large-scale advertising campaigns. Most of the campaigns are mainly done through social media, so we might need to go beyond that. And to reach a wider audience, we might need a larger scale advertising campaigns, which we often see in other parts of the world, such as in the US, Canada, and some of the European countries. Local advocates also thought there needs to be more organizations, new organizations forming. Although there are many groups and individuals working on the ground, many are not formalized just yet. So they would like to see more organizations so we can have a orchestrated effort to make a systemic change. In addition to these, local advocates also share types of activism that they would like to see more. We categorize those based on the ecology of the movement. So if you're not familiar with the ecology of the movement, social movements generally consist of 3 different theories of change. The first one focuses on personal transformation. The second focuses on developing alternatives. And the third focuses on changing dominant institutions. So for personal transformation, although there are many street outreach and other approaches encouraging individuals to change, there needs to be more diverse range of approaches that go beyond street activism. We also found that because the general public is often influenced by celebrities and iconic figures in Asia, advocates hope for more public figures to actively speak up for non-human animals. And although there are some resources about veganism or animal rights available, they are often in English, and even if they are in local languages, they're often just the direct translation of the resources developed by the Western organizations. So there needs to be more context-specific resources available for the local advocates. Lastly, for personal transformation, many advocates also share the need to develop a new word or use of a different word than veganism, which is often associated with elitist Western lifestyle. For alternatives, local advocates hope that plant-based protein to be developed in higher quality and become more accessible and affordable. Advocates involved in corporate engagement expressed that they would like a third party to provide humane labels, certifying good animal welfare products and practices. And there are some vegan or plant-based label initiatives happening in some countries. However, some advocates feel that plant-based labels, some advocates feel hesitant because the labels can make the plant-based food less affordable. Another important project that's lacking in Asia is farm transformation, which also comes with providing farmers alternative livelihood. In terms of dominant institutional change, the advocates thought that there needs to be more advocacy in legal change for laws that protect more types of animals. As of now, the application of animal protection law is very limited to companion animals. And the advocates also thought that different types of activities such as boycotts, protests, and direct actions could be also helpful for changing dominant institutions as well. Okay, so that is it for the overall findings of the forums. Gonna stop sharing the screen. So now we're moving on to the discussions among the country coordinators. And we also want this to be a co-learning experience. So if you have your thoughts on the discussion topic, please feel free to type them out in the chat. If you do share your thoughts in the chat, please keep in mind to stick to our code of conduct. Okay, so the first question to discuss is, what are the most common or biggest cultural roadblocks in animal advocacy movements in your country? So cultural roadblocks could be cultural habits or practices or religion. So let's start with Alia. If you could share findings from Pakistan.
Thank you so much, Kaho, for sharing the findings. So when we look at Pakistan, there are a lot of diverse cultures here, but predominantly it's a Muslim country. And one of the concepts that's embedded into people's mind is the idea of ashraful makhlukat, which means a superior being, which results in people generally abusing and exploiting animals. So people use the idea of being superior beings and then they exploit animals with that. And this ideology has also been informing a lot of culture of meat eating as being more superior to other animals. We also find a lot of desensitivity. People have become desensitized to animal abuse due to the openly practiced violence on animals and abuse on animals. Nothing is hidden behind a wall. Slaughterhouses perform slaughter openly, and that has contributed to desensitization of a large part of the population. It's also very difficult to speak about veganism because it's a very new concept here. There are only a handful of people who are vegans, and culturally, people are not very open to learning. A lot of times we've observed that people's egos get into the way during small conversations as well. So there are these roadblocks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Elia, for sharing that. There are so many aspects that stop people from being open to the idea of veganism. I could see. Yeah, thank you. So next, Shubhra, if you could share the findings from India.
Thank you, Kaho. As India is a diverse country, we follow different religions and cultures. And most of all the religion and cultures involve views of animal, be it for food or for religious slaughtering or sacrificing. People are not enough mature to understand about their religious belief, or whatever they are learning from the beginning, whatever they are taught from the tender age, they are blindly following it. So overcoming the blind follow becomes very difficult for the vegan advocates in our country. And if when we talk about veganism, it is said to be targeted to the minority of the country, because the minorities in our country is supposed to be the majority meat eaters. We believe the minority belonging to our country eats meat a lot. They contribute to the most meat. And then it is said to be that the veganism is targeted to a particular religion. And later when we discuss about the dairy or the cruelty behind the dairy industries, people are not ready to admit it because they feel that it is the most sustainable way of keeping cattle. It is the way of nurturing cows in the country. These are the major roadblocks in India. Thank you, Kaun.
Yeah, thank you, Shubhra. That was really interesting. It seems like a different dietary practices associated with different caste system as well, and the religious practices as well. Yeah, thank you. Srajan, would you like to share the findings from Nepal?
Thank you, Kaho. So one of the major cultural roadblocks in animal advocacy movement of Nepal is traditional or religious animal sacrifice. So people here believe that God will be angry if they stop sacrificing animals. So with the fear of God, as well as to have a healthy and prosperous life, they tend to sacrifice animals in the form of tradition. So, for example, there happens a festival called Gadimai Festival in Bara district of Nepal every 5 years, where hundreds of thousands of animals are sacrificed within a span of 2 to 3 days. So that's quite a lot. So, but due to continuous local activists from Nepal and India, animal sacrifices have reduced significantly. But still, people are cutting the ears of animals and offering the blood of animals to the god. So we can analyze that how people are deeply rooted with the traditional and religious animal sacrifice. So that is one of the hindrances in animal advocacy movement of Nepal. And another one is taking veganism as a Western concept rather than a non-exploitative or peaceful one. So there are few sub-religions within Hindu religion which promote non-harm to sentient beings and follow vegetarian lifestyle. But still, they believe that milk from cows as the purest thing. And while activists talk about veganism in front of those people, both non-vegetarian people and religiously vegetarian people think of it as a Western concept, trying to replace Hindu culture with the outside culture. So they tend to take veganism as a concept of threat. So that is also one of the major problem, cultural roadblocks. And another one is making others carry the weight of sin, that is animal slaughter. So even in Buddhism, which promotes non-violence, Buddhist followers tends to eat meat, and when they want to consume meat, they directly buy it from the meat shop. So when asked about their involvement in animal slaughter, they say that they are not the one to take the to slaughter animals, and so they think that they didn't commit any sin, but they only bought what was already there. They think that like that. So, but indirectly, they are being a part of animal slaughter by paying the butcher to kill the animals. So that is quite a problem. Like they don't take, like if they don't have the direct involvement, they like they are not a part of it. So that is also one of the cultural hindrances. And another one is Nepal is a mix of Hindu and other religions. So there needs to be a multi-layered approach to convince people. So most of the people in Nepal follow Hindu religion, and some follow Buddhism, some follow Islam, and some follow Christianity. So their ways are different in many forms. So there needs to be a multi-layered approach to convince those people in order to reduce animal cruelty within their community. So that is the things that I found during my research survey. Thank you, Kaho.
Thank you, Srajan. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of tensions between different religions, as well as like your culture and the Western culture as well. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I see a question in the comment. Will these findings be published in the official report by AAA in the future? Yes, we will be publishing the report in the written format as well as in the infographics, hoping to publish it by the end of this month. So stay tuned for that. I will make announcements at the end as well. Thank you for the question, Gina. Okay, so next we have Malaysia. Sarah, if you want to share your findings.
Thanks, Kaho. So yeah, just like everyone who's shared so far, Malaysia shares a lot of like similar roadblocks to veganism, just like from the religious aspect, and also like seeing it as a Western thing. A lot of people in Malaysia don't view veganism as like an advocacy movement or like an identity. They sort of see it as like a dietary restriction, really, and they'll think of it as like a diet because I think in Malaysia there's a lot of issues with health. A lot of Malaysians have issues with health, so they see it as like a very restrictive thing. And they also has like religious connotations, because usually when I tell people I'm vegan, a lot of people ask if I'm Buddhist. So it has like those connotations. So a lot of people really see veganism as very restrictive. And just like as well with other religious reasons, a lot of people view animals as like given to them for their consumption by their god. And also we have like Islam is the dominant religion in Malaysia, and sometimes there's a bit of confusion. A lot of people see when meat is labeled as halal, it makes others think that like meat is cruelty free because of that. Yeah, that's all for me. Thanks, Kaho.
Yeah, thank you for sharing a little difficult discussions there. I'm glad that you were able to discuss that with with the participants. Thank you. So let's move on to Thailand. Aim, if you would like to share.
Yes, thank you, Kaho. I can relate a lot the findings with what Sarah just said, because in Thailand, there's also huge misconceptions about veganism and also animal justice or animal rights as well. People often confused veganism with vegetarianism and J, which is a religion-related practice. It involves adopting plant-based diet for certain weeks of a year. So people thought that like it's something that had to do with that like Buddhism thing. The ethics reasons or animal right is kind of like overshadowed by that, and people think it's just all about diet, and that diet is malnutritious, because there's also animal eating culture in Thailand, and there's this view that animals are main part of a dish or a menu. So for example, like the eating culture that we share a lot in Asia is hot pot. In Thailand, it's very popular, and we translated it to mu gratha, which mu means pork or pig. And like you can see that even though it's a meal that mixed with both vegetables and the diet, the ingredient is really different, but we give the name of food based on the animal product as an ingredient. So you can see that how animal eating is a big part of our culinary culture. And another roadblocks for the animal advocacy movement in Thailand that a lot of it come from political area. Many of Thai advocates agree on this point that it really hindered their work, but we will also discuss more about in detail in the full version of the report. So yeah, that's it from Thailand. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing the findings. I could totally relate from my experience in Japan that some of the food has like an animal's name in it. So it's really difficult to disassociate with that from the food from the animals, for sure. Yeah. So next, let's hear from Fajar, the findings from Indonesia.
Thanks, Kaho. So I will just say that a lot of the things that the other country reps said definitely hold true in Indonesia as well, because Indonesia is a rich country, it's an archipelago. So a lot of cultures, a lot of religions, a lot of customs as well. And a lot of those customs do entail animal sacrifice. But consumption-wise, I would say that Indonesia historically has been plant-based because it's an agrarian nation. But when I say plant-based, it's mostly vegetables and fruits and plants, basically. But people will also be consuming fish, for instance, because Indonesia is also a maritime country, which means that a lot of people's livelihood does depend on the fishery industry. But I think as Indonesia progresses and became the world's biggest Muslim nation, well, Indonesia is not an Islamic country per se, but it does have the largest Muslim population in the world. And the common interpretation of the Quran, and a lot of people are religious in Indonesia, so they believe that they don't question anything really. And so when it's perpetually propagated that animals are here for us and not with us, and there's a sort of a legitimacy to that from a religious standpoint, people start thinking and acting as if that's the truth and anything goes. And so people use animals to their liking, basically. And it's not just in terms of food consumption, it also trickles down to wildlife trade, which is a huge thing in Indonesia. A lot of government officials take part in that. It's illegal, technically speaking, but because there's a lot of money involved in this and people are profiting off of it, again, anything goes. In Indonesia, laws almost don't matter as long as there's money involved. If you have money, anything goes really in Indonesia. That's kind of the thing. And I also like to point out the inferiority complex that is so rampant among Indonesians. Consuming a lot of meat and dairy, especially in this day and age, for Indonesians is a form of prestige. It means proximity to Westernness or whiteness. And also I would point out cognitive dissonance, which is a thing anywhere in the world. But in Indonesia, a lot of people care about cats, specifically cats, but also dogs to some extent, and they will share their homes with cats and dogs, but they will still consume other animals, for instance. And also what Sarah was saying about this misconception of veganism being just a dietary choice and an expensive one at that, and one that is reserved for the upper middle class people and untenable. That point of view is rampant in Indonesia as well. So that's it for Indonesia.
Wow, that's so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing that. I found it really interesting how what Surajan was saying about like veganism or plant-based lifestyle is like kind of associated to Western lifestyle, and therefore there's a rejection. But it seems like in your case, Fajar, it looks like the meat eating, consumption of meat is associated with Westernness or whiteness, and therefore people want to be associated or want to be close to that lifestyle. So there's that kind of different reasoning to why people are either hesitant to the idea of veganism or yeah, more open to like wanting to eat, consume more meat. Yeah, that's super interesting. Okay, let's hear from Vietnam. Han, if you could share.
Yes, so like a lot of other countries, there is one major roadblock is the perception that veganism is inherently tied to religion. And that is because Vietnamese people do not understand the concept of ethical veganism. Veganism practiced for the animals and not just for oneself or as part of one's individual faith or religious practice. Even advocates for companion animals, specifically dogs and cats, are made fun of when they say that dogs and cats deserve specific protections, even basic protections. So I immediately get the impression that the concept of rights or protections more generally is just not, just does not have any credibility here. And we don't actually have that foundation to build a movement on. And as I dig deeper, there's also the roadblock of lack of cultural and social support when a person goes vegan. So that's just a individual change and a change in one's personal lifestyle. One is already met with a lot of resistance from our culture and from their social circles. So let alone advocacy, right? They're not finding much support to make positive change, let alone advocate for non-human animals. And there is a general lack of concern for animals due to one, human oppression still going on in our country. And as long as that is not addressed, people will not take the issue of animal justice seriously. Two, we are an open slaughter culture. Animals are slaughtered openly in live markets, and there's still the perception that Vietnam is a largely agrarian economy, where essentially all animals are raised on free-range farms and in small-scale settings only, which is not true. Factory farming exists here too, but people don't know that. And three, last but not least, empathy is not instilled from a young age and is not part of our educational system. And our educational system in general is very much yes or no, you're right or you're wrong. And there's very little encouragement for critical thinking. And thirdly, there is a general resistance to getting active in social movements. There's this sort of political inactiveness that's sort of a general phenomenon in Vietnam. People think getting active, getting involved in activism is not only dangerous, but futile. It will not bring about any change. So people are just sort of resigned to the status quo. And also, even if people want to make change, there is a fundamental lack of foundational knowledge about the issues that they want to get active about. There's a lack of transparency and data. So we don't know just how large scale or intensive animal farming is in order to make our case. Yep, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all really critical insights. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And from the audience, if you have any other thoughts or any things that you think about for any topics that we're talking about, please feel free to type in chat. We would like to hear what you think as well. So yeah, please do. Joseph, would you like to share the findings from the Philippines?
Thanks, Cal. In the Philippines, similar to the other countries, we also have those issues as well, and concerns like open slaughter and also lack of support from the government, and also with the regards to implementation of the laws. But the most evident in the Philippines is actually in religion, because we're mostly Catholic in the Philippines, and we have celebrations in the Catholic religion. We have what we call actually fiesta. This is the feast day of saints, and each of the regions in the Philippines would have their own fiesta, and during fiestas they would serve dishes, and meat is considered actually as a special dish during this time. If you can Google lechon, that's actually a whole roasted pig that is usually served in the Philippines. And even now, another famous dish would be a roasted pig that is a young pig, because they say it's more tasty. So that's more brutal actually, because it's a newborn pig being roasted and served actually in our celebrations. There's also a cultural roadblock, especially on the rural areas. Of course, there's poverty as well concerning the Philippines, and gambling is a concern, quick rich schemes in the Philippines. So there's horse racing, there's cockfighting as well. And most people in the rural areas are used to hunting or cooking animals for their food as well. So just like the other countries as well, education is badly needed for the people, especially to offer them some alternatives, not only for the dishes, but also with their cultural practices as well.
Yeah, those are really great insight. Thank you so much. And like in the Philippines, I think what is unique about the Philippines is that it's a predominantly, it has a large Christian population. So different from other Asian country, it has a different religious reason for why people are hesitant to the idea of veganism. Yeah, thank you so much. And I see in the chat, Gina share with us interesting link. I would check this out later. Thank you for sharing. And next, let's hear from Pin, the findings from Taiwan.
Thank you, Kaho. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I can totally relate it to what everyone just said. For example, in Taiwan, culturally, veganism is greatly connected with religion as well. For example, the word vegan causes a lot of confusion. Even the food labeling is confusing. For example, if the food contains garlic, onion, or alcohol, and this kind of product will be labeled as non-vegan food. But even though for us, it is totally fine. They are just plant-based, but this is because the influence of Buddhism. And in Taiwan, we have huge population of vegetarian, but most of them is for personal practice, for religion, or some people think vegan only for health issue. So I think this is the cultural part. It's very difficult to talk about vegan. So there's a lot of misconception like other country. And for example, like legally, the animal law in Taiwan, I think there are not enough protection and full of gray area and not fully implemented. For example, eating dogs and cats is forbidden in Taiwan, but in terms of other farm animals, there's very limited protection. About most organization, animal related organization only focus on, besides from dogs and cats, most of them, they focus on animal welfare, because the general public thinks animal welfare is already good enough. Why we need to advance to animal rights? So I think that's also an issue. And about politically, because this year in Taiwan, we have a major mayor election this year. And I did some research, and I accidentally found out a political party called the Animal Rights Party. So I contact with them. Then I also follow them on social media, but I realized even though the name is called Animal Rights Party, but they are still consuming animals. So I don't really know what's their intentional are. And I think I was quite disappointed. I think if this party can represent animal rights, I think this will cause even more confusion. Yes, I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, there are a lot of difficult aspects in terms of politics, and also like the labeling, like the understanding of what actual like veganism actually is. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And for Japan, so Ellie was supposed to be here today, but as I mentioned, she is not able to today. So I'm just gonna read out the notes that she prepared for me. So for Japan, Ellie found that there is a lot of Japan is a collectivist culture, so people avoid standing out from the crowd. So even just going vegan can make them stand out. So people are sometimes like hesitant to the idea of veganism that way. And in terms of advocacy, there's a lot of stigma around NGO space. People think that and working at the NGO is not really seen not as like a legitimate career path. So people are kind of not really willing to stay in the space. And on the other hand, being a volunteer or doing unpaid work is seen more virtuous, which is I found interesting personally. And if it's a paid position, people often feel overwhelming with the more responsibilities as well. So that's why some people are not really kind of stay in the able to stay in the NGO space. And Japan is also a consumerist capitalist society. So businesses are taking over the concept of vegan or veganism, and they produce trendy, like fashionable kind of products, which can be associated with Western elitist lifestyle. So for that aspect, some people are, like Fajar said, if people were willing to be or wanted to be close to the whiteness or Westernness, they would like that kind of product. But on the other hand, some people resist the idea of like being like Westernized as well. So there are kind of two different ways of resistance in that aspect. So yeah, those are the findings in terms of the cultural blocks. As I mentioned, if you have any other things that we didn't discuss, we didn't touch on, please write it in the chat box. I would like to hear your thoughts as well. But yeah, from these findings, I found a lot of diversity in Asia, not just religious, but also like customs and different dishes, different practices. And I also found that it's really important to be careful with the cultural context, especially religion. And there are different religious reasons for like exploiting animals depending on the country. So we really need to be careful with that when we do advocacy work. Okay, so moving on to the next question. What types of resources or support are most needed by local advocates? How would these resources of support help strengthen animal advocacy movements in your country? Again, if you have any thoughts on this topic, please write it in the chat box. Let's go around in the same way. So Alia, if you could start with the findings from Pakistan, that'd be great.
Thank you, Kaho. So when we think about Pakistan and the resources they might need, we have to understand that there is no movement here. There are no advocates here. Very few, I think a handful, I can count them, how many there are who are working for veganism or animal advocacy. So when you don't have groups and you don't have communities, you have to go to the lower level of raising awareness, to raise awareness in order to have a few activists who can actually work on something so that funding can be given to them in some way or the other. But overall, speaking to different welfare organizations and welfare groups who are working on ground, they said that for them, most problematic was volunteer retention and staff retention that I interviewed. But then we have to look at it that the welfare organizations are slightly ahead of the vegans in the country. So the welfare groups still have more support as compared to the vegans. And what we overall discussed was that there needs to be more collaborations and more support in awareness raising campaigns. And we need to focus more on community building to start off something and create a base in order to have some projects going on in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those findings. Yeah, it looks like other people in the chat box also said that the staff retention is also a problem for them as well. So yeah, please keep chatting in the chat box. Shubra, if you want to share the findings from India on this topic.
Thank you, Kaho. So as I earlier mentioned that India is a diverse country and we have a very good population. So we basically need human resource to talk about veganism, to advocate about animal rights. For that, we need skill development programs. If the advocates or the newly turned vegans are taught to advocate about animals on one-on-one conversation, that can bring a major impact in Indian animal right advocacy. As India is said to be a land of ahimsa, we believe all the religion in India believe that non-violence is the essence of all the religions. We are taught non-violence as well. But many of us, even when I turned vegan, I was unaware about the facts, about the cruelty being happened with the animals. I get to know through an animal advocate only. So we need, if we develop more human resource in our country, that will help to boost our movement. And the second thing which I found out was the fundraising, because not many vegan activists are into fundraising. So the fundraising skills, if they can improve, we can improve in the fundraising skills of our activists, that will again enhance the movement in the country. And the third thing which I found out was the marketing strategy, because in India, the dairy products are marketed very well. They can be seen everywhere and anywhere in the country. Even in the rural areas also, it is thought that it is marketed that the milk is highly nutritious. It is full of nutrition. So if that way we can promote vegan foods or vegan substitute, that will enhance the movement in India. That's it, Kao. Thank you.
Thank you, Shubra. Yeah, I'm glad that you touched on the point about human resources and that how that can help build the movement. I think the session before this by Vada, one line that I remember was that we need to balance distributing resources into outreach and movement building. So definitely like a lack of human resources can just make the balance not really equal. So yeah, thank you for sharing that finding. Srajan, would you like to share the findings from Nepal?
Thank you, Kaho, again. So in the context of Nepal, one of the foremost things that is needed by the local activists is the proper mentorship and appropriate courses to initiate activism. So there are vegans in different places of Nepal who are really interested in activism, but due to insufficient support and funding and communication gap and also a lack of knowledge, like they haven't been able to come in the front with campaigns. For example, I had organized animal advocacy forum in Pokhara. So like it was quite surprising that there were quite good number of vegans in Pokhara, but they were not quite familiar with each other. So I had to conduct a forum in order to bring them together so they will have a communication. And even after that forum, they were quite hesitating with the communication as well. So I think if we can give a proper mentorship and good academic courses for them to come to initiate activities and to encourage them, to push them, then I think there could be that could be one of the major things that is needed for the local advocates. And the one is vegan startups and affordability, especially in the food sector. So vegan startups as well as movements are mostly capital centric in Nepal. And even though there are few vegan startups, it is still hard for the low income groups as well as middle class people to afford the vegan food. So for example, 1 liter of animal-based milk is rupees 100 in Nepal, whereas the cheapest alternative plant-based milk is rupees 200 per liter. So that is quite the double of the animal-based milk, and it is creating a problem for the people to shift their diet. And another one is proper paid opportunities. So there are few animal welfare related organizations in Nepal which really have paid staff, and even among them there seems to have been high employee turnover ratio due to more workload and comparatively less salary. So there has been like there are less organizations who are working more with high number of resources, and there are lots of causes that needs to be covered. And when the organization which have of financial resources hires staff, then they are given a high number of high level of load works, and they cannot sustain more in the organization with comparatively less salary. So they tend to go abroad or for another works, or change the organization that they want to work on. And I think that is something that is needed for the local advocates. And another last one I would like to highlight is the curriculum development for the children in the schools and behavior shaping to develop love and compassion for animals. As we know that like if we sow the seed to the younger generation, then they could provide a good result in the days to come in the future. So like I think there is only one or two organizations that is actually working on curriculum development. So if we could just push more on this curriculum development exercises, then I think we could have lots of activities in the days to come in Nepal, and our movement could be shifted towards next stage. So I think these are the things that I would like to highlight on behalf of Nepal. Thank you, Kaho.
Wow, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm glad that you and your participants were able to come up with some ideas for developing different types of materials like the curriculum for children. And we also talk about mentorship programs. So yeah, those are really great findings. Thank you so much. And you also talked about the price of plant-based milk. I think there is a conversation going on in the chat. In some countries, it's really, really expensive. Like in Pakistan, Alia said the normal cow milk is 200. I'm not sure the currency is, versus plant-based milk can go up to 1,200. That's like 6 times more. So yeah, there is definitely an issue of plant-based products being not affordable. So yeah, thank you. Next, let's hear from Sarah for Malaysia.
Thank you, Kaho. Yeah, I think the findings in Malaysia, probably we can see this throughout Asia. It's an issue of like fundraising capacity or learning how to fundraise. There's like a big issue with like a lot of advocates and advocacy groups learning how to fundraise, because we need like the funding in order to build a more complete base of advocates, because a lot of people come and go because of opportunities, because it's just not feasible to raise, like for example, like raise a family or buy a house with like the measly income that you would make as like a NGO, because it's just like in what you mentioned, Kaho, about Japan, it's like for NGO space or like advocacy space, like unpaid work is seen as more noble, or it's also used as an excuse to pay people less. And yeah, so funding or like capacity to learn how to fundraise is something that's missing for advocates in general, but definitely for advocacy in like for animal advocacy. And another big thing, I think, is that information in general is lacking, especially information about animal welfare, which results in the misrepresentation of the actual situation of animal welfare. For example, like even government officials think that the welfare of, for example, egg-laying chickens is good based on what the companies say. So the companies will say like, oh, like, yeah, it's good, like the chickens are fine. And then the government officials are like, yeah, okay, everything's fine. So yeah, I think information transparency and accessibility is a big thing because we don't have those, like, you know how you see in the West, like people have a lot of like footage of like the factories and stuff like that. And that's
Yeah,
all.
great. Thank you so much. Yeah, and thank you for bringing up the funding, the need for fundraising opportunities and fundraising skill building. We have a workshop tomorrow by Gulam. He will be talking about the skills for fundraising. So if you're interested, please join. It's going to be at 4 p.m. Hong Kong time. So yeah, if you're interested in learning about fundraising, please come by. Okay, so next, let's hear from, I think, Aim for Thailand.
Yes, thank you, Kaho. I can really relate a lot to what Sarah said again about fundraising, also fundraising training. From the Thai advocates that I talked to, even they have a paid job by like international establishment in Thailand, but they still feel like they don't have job stability compared to other types of job or jobs in different areas. But of course, we still really need to be able to create more paid opportunity and also support the programs that operated in the local community as well. And it's important to also establish more new organizations, because right now one organization kind of do everything, ranging from corporate engagement also or like raising awareness with online campaigns and stuff. So when there are more people, more human resources, more people in the movement, I think that will enhance their capacity to focus on one thing, and they can become more effective as well. Another thing that we discussed in our forum is that Thai advocates wish that there would be like a middle entity that can facilitate networking within the movement. So like facilitating building relationships between advocates so that they can share resources or knowledge or even news, so that they can also come up with new projects that they can collaborate as well. Also, this is because human resources are still very lacking in Thailand, both paid and unpaid, and most of the work are rely on like unpaid volunteers, so they need a lot of volunteers to help them with stuff, with the projects. But the problem is the majority of animal advocacy organizations are concentrated only in Bangkok. It's understandable because Thailand is a very centralized country, like everything are only in the big city. This is a problem for volunteer work. For example, there are people who interested to help with the work, but they live far away from Bangkok, so they have to be responsible for the expenses to travel to Bangkok too, so make it more difficult for them to join, even if they want to. So yeah, this is what we discussed in Thailand forum. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just like going back to what you said about the previous question, you mentioned like there's a political situation that makes it difficult for people to do some sort of advocacy work. And that also, I guess, like contributes to the lack of human resources as well. So it's not just like this cultural aspect, but also political. And you also mentioned like economic aspect. If people were residing in rural area, then that would cost them more to come to the central to work. So yeah, there are so many layers to it. Thank you so much for sharing that. Fajar, would you like to share the findings from Indonesia?
Sure, thank you, Kaho. I think it's interesting what Aim was saying about people, things being so capital centric. I live in Jakarta, which is the capital of Indonesia. And there are millions and millions of people here. There are more people in Jakarta than the entire Singapore, for instance. But for me personally, it's been difficult to find like advocates in Jakarta, as in animal advocates. I wanted to point out that in recent years, social justice advocacy slash movement, and therefore advocates, are on the rise. So social justice, anything to do with social justice is becoming sexier by the day, I feel. But people don't, a lot of people, even those working in that field, in the social justice field, don't see animal justice, animal rights, or animal advocacy as a legitimate thing or something that needs attention, because I think this is the thing in the rest of the world. I believe that animals are seen as less than humans. So when there are so many issues regarding humans, why care about the animals? And I see a lot of that in my surroundings, personally, in my circles here in Jakarta, and also for Indonesia specifically. There's the veganism, the strain of veganism that is popular or more popular right now is from the dietary aspect or the health aspect. So the animal justice aspect is not touched upon, I would say. So for me, I think what advocates, based on my experience and the findings that I got from forum, the most important thing is at the moment the recontextualization of veganism as a social justice thing, not just a diet or a healthy diet or an expensive diet or a Western lifestyle. And to that end, we will need tactics and strategies first to appeal to the urbanites, the middle class people, the everyday people, also to government bodies or institutions, and specifically when we're pushing for quote unquote safer issues like dog meat trade, wildlife trade, or life export, and also how to appeal to the practitioners and the menial workers in animal agriculture, because we also need to think about them. That will require a better synergy with the vegan food and beverage sector, the majority of which is very much dominated by the upper middle class people, like startups and such. And one thing that I do think is important and doesn't get talked about often is international pressure or involvement. It does work, especially if it's by Western or white majority nations or Hollywood celebrities. A while ago, Leonardo DiCaprio came here, I think to I don't know, an island or a forest in Sumatra, and he was talking about like land use for palm oil plantation. He spoke out about these things, and it became a major international news, and public government officials were enraged by that. But that got people talking. That got people's attention, and I think Elia and I talked about this the other day. I think this was in Sri Lanka. Cher spoke out about like an animal held captive for years, and there had been a group of animal rights activists working towards the freedom of this elephant, I believe. It was not until Cher spoke out about this earlier this year that the animal was freed. So this is for people, especially in a Western country or in a white majority nation. You have that privilege to speak out about these things and help out the advocates in Asia, for instance. It's, again, going back to the inferiority complex that I was talking about. Sometimes it does take that kind of thing to get people talking and take action, for better or worse. So that's all for me.
Yeah, it's kind of sad to hear that there's this inferiority complex, and people don't listen unless someone famous, who is often white, from the Western country to speak up to to listen to the claims. But at the same time, I think we have to be careful with how we can use those power influences, and also at the same time trying to empower ourselves from the inside of Asia, and to kind of challenge that inferiority complex. I would like to see that very much. But yeah, thank you for sharing your findings. Let's move on to Vietnam. Han, would you like to share the findings?
Yes, thank you. There are two main needs that I see. One is for capacity building. So foundational knowledge about animal justice issues and strategies that have been used in animal advocacy. People need to be able to articulate why animal justice is a big issue. I mean, I know so many people who are not confident to even defend or justify why they practice a vegan life. So hesitant to defend even that individual choice. So I feel like we're a long way away from being able to convince other people why we need an animal justice movement in Vietnam. And secondly, there's a big need for social and emotional support or community building. So if anyone was here for Eun's session from DXC Korea, bond is one of the biggest, if not the biggest factor in determining if someone will stay and continue to be involved in a social movement. And that's my experiment. That's my experience as well, being involved in grassroots activism. If I weren't friends with my fellow activists, I'm not sure that I would have stayed for as long as I did. So huge need for community building, which is a challenge because there are vegans in Vietnam. There are so many vegans, even vegans from birth, but the problem is they don't speak up. They don't speak about that choice, and they don't actively seek community. Also, I believe we need mentorship from both grassroots activists and professionals working in animal advocacy organizations. So that young people who are wanting to get involved, who are just getting involved, know that there is a sustainable path forward. Because unfortunately, I've seen a few young people who find out about the issue. They're very passionate, but after a while, they're met with a lot of resistance from family and society. And there's no structure and there's no precedent in Vietnam for any kind of previous movement that we can learn from in terms of what works and what doesn't, so that they just fizzle out. And some of them even abandon veganism as a personal practice. So that's really unfortunate to see. And I'd love to see more mentorship from those of us with enough experience.
Thank you, Han. Yeah, thank you for reiterating the importance of social and emotional support and the community building. That was also emphasized by Yoon's workshop that we had this morning. Sorry, morning for me, evening for you, I think. And I think Elia also mentioned that the importance of community building. I think if you're in the other parts of the world, like especially in the West, we take those things for granted so much. Like, for example, I'm in Canada, there are so many vegans, so many advocates here that I can just go to for any questions or any like concerns or frustration that I had. But in Vietnam, for example, it's not the case. And that would make people kind of like move away from the movement itself. So yeah, I would like to see more of those community building for sure. Let's move on to the Philippines. Joseph, would you like to share the findings?
Thank you, Kao. Same as the other countries, actually, there's also the financial support needed for advocates in the Philippines. You're actually going against huge corporations as well in the Philippines. The most famous restaurant actually in the Philippines is called Jollibee. It's ironic because Jollibee is a big B, but their main dish, the most famous one, is called Chicken Joy. It's actually a fried chicken. And advocates before even tried to fight the popularity of that, and they had Chicken Sad to go against Chicken Joy, but still because of lack of resources and funding, they were not able to push forward their advocacy, and still Chicken Joy is still famous in the Philippines still. Community building is also a challenge, although there are a lot of Facebook groups in the Philippines because we're one of those who use social media a lot, but they need also financial support as well, and also capacity building and training, especially emotional support for advocates who have been working on the same issues for years already. You can see the same people in the same organization who have been doing great work, but they're still encountering the same issues and problems for a long time already. And then there's also the need for mentorship, especially for the young volunteers and advocates who would only volunteer for a year or two, and then they have to leave because they have to find a better work or a better career that pays better than doing advocacy work.
That's so interesting to hear. There's different needs for people who are working for a long time and the younger advocates who just started. And then we need to develop a different kind of support system for different groups of people. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Let's move on to Taiwan. Pin, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kaho. I think like a lot of other country, they just mentioned, funding and leadership training is very needed in Taiwan. For example, most of the organization, they have some core member, but besides from that, they rely on donation or volunteer. And inside the animal welfare or animal rights group, most of people would choose donate to companion animal, so which make farm animal even like more even like marginalized. Yeah. And leadership training, I think, is also very important. Also here, what we do in AAA. For example, I feel like, for example, in our culture, it's not very, for us, it's not easy to confront other people, or confrontation is really intimidate in our culture. So even though some people, they are really eager to do something, but they are not interest in being a leader, or they don't want to be leader. So I think is like we don't have this resource. If someone wants to be a leader and there's no training and to put different people in the right place. Also about policy reform, like I mentioned before, I think the law still has a lot of room to improve, and about the approach as well, as training, and also develop international collaboration between organization and individual, and building database in local language for reference and research, because oftentimes people may be interested in the topic, but there are not many like material they can look it up. I mean, for example, veganism, then there's a lot of confusion. I mean, like a proper material about animal rights or animal advocacy. Also, there's a problem between in Taiwan, the gaps between cities and counties, countries. City and country, for example, in the capital Taipei, they are the street activists. They tell me they can easily find more than 10 people on the weekends. But for example, in other smaller city or countries, they can barely find they can barely find 5 people. So I think there's still the difference between big city and smaller city, yes. Also, one thing I think it would be great for some vegans, celebrity or influence in Taiwan, because they have huge platform. but they don't use it for animal advocacy. They only focus on like personal lifestyle or personal choice. So I think it's a bit a pity if we can like collaborate with them. I think that will be great. That's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pin. Yeah, it seems like in Taiwan, there are some structures in place, but there aren't enough training or support. So yeah, I would like to see more projects focusing on that for sure. So from Japan, I'm just going to read out the findings that Ellie passed on for me for this session. So in Japan, Ellie found that there needs to be more mental health support like other countries. Younger advocates doing street activism especially are feeling a lot of burnout. There needs to be also leadership training and mentorship, especially in strategy planning to get ideas on the ground and move beyond street outreach. And also funding would be needed for a project like that. And there also needs to be a data that's relevant to Japan to really understand the ins and outs of animal agriculture in Japan in order for the advocates to better strategize their actions. And they also indicated that they would like to see more paid opportunities, not just the volunteers, but paid opportunities so that they can focus more on their advocacy work. As I mentioned earlier, there is a lot of stigma around NGO space in Japan, and which also comes from kind of toxic work environment sometimes. So there needs to be like training for organizational culture to become more healthier and more sustainable, to create a more healthier and sustainable working environment. And there also needs to be more initiatives focused on farmed animals. At the moment, there are some, but not many that we really need. Like we really need a lot to really focus on farmed animals. Yeah, thank you so much. So there are a lot more that we can share, but unfortunately, it is time to close the session soon. So stay tuned for our report that will be coming out by the end of this month. If you like to be updated, please subscribe to our newsletter and follow our social media for updates. Yeah, I hope you all learn interesting findings from different countries. I personally really loved hearing from all of the country coordinators, and I'm so glad that some of these forums were the first time that local advocates really got together to discuss some of the culturally specific challenges and solutions. So I'm so happy that we were able to provide that opportunities for them. And as capacity building organizations, AAA, our hope is to utilize these findings to develop more culturally relevant and appropriate approaches to better help non-human animals. And as our findings shows, there are lots of gaps that need to be filled. At the same time, we also need to be careful about different cultural, historical, socioeconomic, and political contexts of each country and maybe even region that influence the people's relationship with and perceptions of non-human animals. So we are really excited that we were, I'm so happy that we got to share some of the findings today with all of you. So yeah, like I said, please stay tuned for the updates. I'm just gonna make a few announcements. So we're also excited to announce that we're holding Animal Advocacy Academy again in summer next year. We did our first academy earlier this year in 5 different languages, and it was a huge success. We're hoping to expand it in more languages next year. So please keep updated on social media and newsletter. The recordings of our past events can be accessed on our YouTube channel as well, so please check that out. And we're also looking for new members to join Animal Alliance Asia. So if you're interested, please visit our website to see the roles you can apply to. And please take a few minutes to fill in a simple survey so we can improve and bring you an even better experience next year. Please fill this in when you finish attending all of the workshop that you wanted to attend to. And lastly, if you like to see more projects like this, please consider donating us. By donating, you will help us become more sustainable as an organization to pay for our day-to-day expenses and administration costs. And enable us to do more educational events like this. You can support us from the link pasted in the chat. Thank you so much for those who have already supported us by donating. We couldn't have made the conference successful without you. So this is the end of today's sessions. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Hong Kong time, our fundraising specialist, Guam, will be giving a workshop on tools for effective fundraising in the animal advocacy space. He has a great amount of knowledge and experience in fundraising, so please come join us at 4 p.m. Hong Kong time tomorrow using the same link. Yeah, thank you everyone so much for joining. I hope to see you tomorrow. And thank you for all the messages and questions and comments in the chat box as well.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great day or night, wherever you are.